Imagine standing before a mirror, but not the kind that reflects your face. This mirror does not show your skin, your scars, or the asymmetry of your features. Instead, it reflects something deeper, your flaws, not as blemishes, but as fractures in the story you've told yourself, the cracks in your confidence, the parts of you that have been whispered about in shame, hidden under layers of performance, buried beneath the weight of not enough. Now imagine that this mirror begins to warp. The flaws, those things you've spent a lifetime correcting, disguising, or apologizing for, start to shift. They twist into something unfamiliar, yet strangely magnetic. The crooked smile you've always hated suddenly seems full of character. The hesitation in your speech, once a source of embarrassment, now carries the weight of thoughtfulness. The body you've fought against for years appears not as an enemy, but as a living testament to survival. What if everything you've been taught about imperfection is wrong? We live in a world that sells us polish, smooth edges, curated lives, airbrushed versions of reality. Flaws are framed as failures. Weaknesses must be eliminated. Vulnerability is a liability. And yet, beneath this relentless pursuit of perfection, something gnaws at us. A quiet, persistent question. Why does the pursuit of flawlessness leave us feeling emptier, not fuller? Consider the paradox. The things we are most ashamed of, the parts of ourselves we exile, are often the very things that make us unforgettable. The stutter that gives a speaker unexpected power in their pauses. The scar that tells a story no smooth skin ever could. The anxiety that forces deeper empathy. Even nature understands this. The gnarled oak, twisted by storms, is more striking than the perfectly symmetrical sapling. The cracked vase, repaired with gold, becomes more precious than the untouched one. So why do we resist this truth in ourselves? Is it because we've been conditioned to believe that love, success, and belonging are granted only to those who meet an impossible standard? Or is it something darker? A fear that if we truly embraced our flaws, we would have to confront the terrifying freedom of being real? No more hiding, no more performing, just the raw, unedited truth of who we are. Think of the last time you witnessed someone unapologetically own their imperfections. The way it disarmed you. The way it made you lean in, not look away. There is an undeniable magnetism in authenticity. A kind of beauty that polished perfection can never replicate. And yet, when it comes to ourselves, we recoil. We sand down our edges. We apologize for taking up space. What are we so afraid of? That we will be rejected? That we will be seen as less than? Or is it that deep down, we know the real danger lies not in being flawed, but in being ignored, in becoming just another face in the crowd, indistinguishable from the masses who traded their uniqueness for acceptance? The mirror is still warping. The flaws are no longer just visible, they are alive, pulsing with a strange kind of power. And now, the most unsettling question of all arises. What if your flaws were never holding you back, but were actually the key to everything you've ever wanted? The answer is not what you've been taught. It is darker, deeper, and far more liberating than you've been led to believe. But before we go there, we must first uncover the hidden forces that made you fear your imperfections in the first place. The lies you've swallowed, the systems that profit from your self-doubt, and the psychological chains that keep you trapped in the pursuit of an illusion. Because the truth is not just beautiful, it is revolutionary. The first lie you were taught was that perfection is possible. From the moment we are born, we are measured against milestones, against siblings, against the glossy ideals of a world that worships the flawless. We learn, quickly and ruthlessly, that to be loved is to be approved of, and to be approved of is to erase every rough edge, every shadow, every trace of what makes us unpredictable. But who benefits from this lie? The answer is not just advertisers or influencers. It is the very architecture of human civilization. Ancient philosophers like Plato dreamed of perfect forms, ideal shapes, ideal virtues, ideal humans. Religion preached purity, demanding the suppression of sinful, human impulses. Capitalism thrives on manufactured inadequacy, selling you solutions to problems it invented. Even modern psychology, in its early days, pathologized deviation, labeling anything outside the norm as a disorder to be fixed. We have been conditioned to hate our flaws because hatred is profitable. But the deeper, more insidious truth is this. Your flaws were never yours to begin with. They were handed to you by parents who feared your strangeness, by teachers who rewarded compliance, by lovers who wanted you easier, by algorithms that feed on your insecurity. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the repressed, denied parts of ourselves that we exile into darkness. We do this not because these parts are evil, but because they are unacceptable in the eyes of the tribe. A child who is too loud learns to whisper. A woman who is too bold learns to soften. A man who feels too much learns to numb. And so, piece by piece, we disown ourselves, believing that only by carving away our ugliness can we be loved. But here's the fatal flaw in that logic. What if the traits you've been taught to hide are the very ones that make you necessary? Friedrich Nietzsche saw this clearly. He wrote of Amor, Fati, the love of fate. Not just accepting but embracing every twist, every wound, every so-called flaw as part of an unconquerable self. To him, the perfect human was not the one without cracks, but the one who willed those cracks into being, who saw them as proof of a life fully lived. Viktor Frankl, surviving the Holocaust, discovered the same truth in despair. What is to give light must endure burning. Your flaws are not accidents. They are not failures. They are the scars of a soul that has dared to exist in a world hell-bent on molding it into something smaller, quieter, safer. So why does this conditioning run so deep? Because fear is the oldest control mechanism in history. A society of self-doubt is a society that obeys. A person convinced they are not enough will always buy, always strive, always beg for permission. But a person who realizes their so-called flaws are strengths in disguise? That person is dangerous, uncontrollable, free. Jean-Paul Sartre called this bad faith. The act of lying to ourselves to fit into roles we never chose. We play the good employee, the perfect partner, the agreeable friend, all while silencing the parts of us that rebel. And in doing so, we commit the greatest betrayal, not of society, but of ourselves. But the most chilling realization? You are not just a victim of this system, you are its accomplice. Every time you apologize for your intensity, your sensitivity, your awkwardness, every time you think, if only I were different, you reinforce the lie. You become the jailer of your own soul. Arthur Schopenhauer saw the tragedy in this. Most men are not really free. They are confined by the chains of their own making. And yet, there is a way out. Not by fixing yourself, but by realizing you were never broken. Not by becoming perfect, but by understanding that perfection was always the enemy of aliveness. The question is no longer why do I have these flaws, but who would I be if I stopped fighting them? The answer will unravel you, because what comes next is not just liberation, it is a reckoning. Consider this. Every flaw you deny doesn't disappear, it metastasizes. It seeps into your relationships as insecurity, your career as self-sabotage, your creativity as paralysis. The parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge do not vanish. They go underground, twisting into something far more dangerous: shame, obsession, or worse, a life half-lived. You were told that hiding your flaws would make you stronger, but in reality it made you smaller. The illusion of control, the pursuit of flawlessness, is, at its core, an attempt to control the uncontrollable, your humanity. But control is a mirage. The more you try to erase your imperfections, the more they define you. The person who fears being seen as needy becomes emotionally distant, starving their relationships of true intimacy. The artist who fears criticism never shares their work, silencing their voice before it can ever be heard. The leader who refuses to admit weakness creates a culture of fear, where no one dares to speak the truth. This is the cruel irony. In trying to avoid judgment, you become a prisoner of it. The neurological trap: your brain is wired to seek safety in sameness. Cognitive biases like the spotlight effect, the belief that others notice your flaws more than they do, and confirmation bias, only seeing evidence that confirms your inadequacy, reinforce the illusion that your imperfections are catastrophic. But here's what neuroscience reveals. Your brain doesn't distinguish between physical and social survival. The fear of being found out as flawed triggers the same primal panic as being chased by a predator. That's why rejection hurts, not just emotionally, but physically. And yet, what if the danger isn't in being flawed, but in believing you shouldn't be? The cultural hypnosis society doesn't just discourage flaws, it profits from your hatred of them. The beauty industry thrives on convincing you your face is a problem to be fixed. The self-help industry sells you endless improvement, while implying you are perpetually incomplete. Social media turns authenticity into a performance, where even vulnerability is curated. You were never meant to win this game, because the game was designed to keep you playing forever, always chasing, never arriving. The silent rebellion of the body. Your body knows the truth. Chronic stress, burnout, insomnia, These are not just symptoms of a busy life. They are the revolt of a soul forced into a shape it was never meant to hold. The perfectionist develops migraines. The people-pleaser suffers autoimmune disorders. The repressed creative loses themselves in numbness or addiction. Your body will not be lied to. It will screen what your mind has been trained to suppress. The ripple effect. This is not just about you. Every time you hide your flaws, you give others permission to do the same. A parent who pretends to have it all together raises children terrified of failure. A leader who never admits mistakes creates a team that hides theirs until they explode. A society that worships perfection breeds loneliness, because no one dares to be real. The cost of this illusion is not just personal, it is collective. The turning point. There is a moment, a crack in the facade, when the weight of pretending becomes too heavy. Maybe it's the breakdown after years of holding it together, the relationship that collapses under the weight of unspoken truths, the sudden, aching realization that you don't even know who you are beneath the performance. This is not destruction. This is the beginning, because the only way out is through. And what waits on the other side is not what you've been taught to fear, but what you've been taught to forget. There is a moment, often quiet, often terrifying, when you realize you have been lied to, not by any one person, but by the very air you've breathed since childhood. The lie that whispered, you must be smooth where you are rough. You must be certain where you are questioning. You must be small where you are vast. This is where the rebellion begins, not with a shout, but with a refusal, a single, silent, no, to the tyranny of perfection. The first act of defiance. Seeing the lie before you can break free, you must recognize the bars of your cage. The bar of comparison, measuring yourself against illusions, against people who are also pretending. The bar of conditionality, believing you are only worthy if you meet some shifting, impossible standard. The bar of completion, the idea that one day, after enough fixing, you will finally arrive. These are myths, and myths only have power when you believe them. The second act of defiance, reclaiming your shadow. Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Your flaws are not mistakes, they are disowned power. That anger you suppress? It could be the fuel for your boundaries. That sensitivity you hide? It might be your greatest source of empathy. That chaos you fear? It could be the birthplace of your creativity. What if the parts of yourself you've been taught to hate are actually your guides? The third act of defiance. The practice of unpolished living. Rebellion is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice. Wear your scars without apology. Speak with your real voice, not the one you think people want to hear. Let your body exist as it is, without begging permission. Seek discomfort, not safety. The moment you feel the urge to hide, lean in. The vulnerability you fear is the exact threshold where connection begins. Replace fixing with integrating. You are not a problem to be solved. You are a paradox to be lived. The fourth act of defiance. Rewriting the story. Every flaw has a history. Who told you it was unacceptable? Was it the parent who feared your wildness? The lover who wanted you easier to handle? The system that profits from your self-doubt? Now, take back the narrative. That stutter isn't a flaw, it's a rhythm. That anxiety isn't weakness, it's a finely tuned radar. That failure isn't proof of inadequacy, it's data for your evolution. The fifth act of defiance. Building a new world. This isn't just about personal liberation, it's about cultural sabotage. When you stop hiding, you give others permission to do the same. When you embrace your mess, you disrupt the illusion of perfection. When you refuse to shrink, you make space for others to expand. This is how revolutions begin, not with armies, but with audacity. The final realization. The rebellion is not out there. It is in here, in the quiet moments when you choose to laugh too loudly, to love too fiercely, to take up space unapologetically. This is how you reclaim yourself, not by becoming perfect, but by becoming free. And freedom, as it turns out, was the point all along. Here is the secret no one told you. Your flaws were never flaws at all. They were always the fingerprints of something far more profound. The unmistakable signature of your humanity. The illusion of brokenness. You have spent years, perhaps a lifetime, believing you needed to be repaired. That there was some pristine, ideal version of yourself waiting to be uncovered if only you sanded down the rough edges, silenced the messy emotions, and contorted yourself into the shape of acceptability. But what if you were never broken? What if the very things you've been taught to hide, your contradictions, your scars, your so-called weaknesses, are not obstacles to greatness, but the foundation of it. The alchemy of imperfection. History's most magnetic figures were not flawless. They were unapologetically human. Frida Kahlo transformed physical suffering into art that still shakes the world. Abraham Lincoln's depression forged his unparalleled empathy. Einstein's learning difficulties led him to see the universe differently. Their power did not come in spite of their imperfections, but because of them. This is the alchemy you've been denied. The understanding that your cracks are not where the light escapes, but where it enters. The death of the ideal self. There is a version of you that lives in your mind, perfect, polished, beyond reproach. That version is a ghost. It does not breathe. It does not bleed. It does not laugh so hard it snorts or love so deeply it aches. That ideal is not a goal. It is a funeral for your aliveness. The moment you stop chasing it is the moment you begin to truly live. The radical embodiment. To embrace your flaws is not passive acceptance. It is active rebellion. It is looking in the mirror and thanking the body that carries you, rather than punishing it for not fitting an arbitrary mold. Speaking your truth even when your voice shakes, because authenticity is more valuable than polish. Loving fiercely, knowing that heartbreak is the tax on a life fully lived. This is how you become real in a world that profits from your artifice. The ultimate paradox here lies. The final, most liberating truth. The things that make you vulnerable are the same things that make you powerful. Your sensitivity is your radar for truth. Your failures are your curriculum. Your quirks are your signature. The Japanese art of kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, not to hide the cracks, but to highlight them. You are the artist and the art. Your scars are not something to conceal. They are what make you priceless. The invitation. This is not a conclusion, but a beginning. The world will continue to whisper that you are too much and not enough, all at once. It will try to sell you cures for your humanity. Your only task is to refuse. To wake up each morning and choose the unedited version of yourself, not because it's easy, but because it's the only way to be free. The final question when you stand before that mirror again, the one that shows not your surface, but your soul, what will you see? A collection of mistakes to be fixed? Or a masterpiece, imperfect and alive, more breathtaking than any fantasy of perfection could ever be? The answer changes everything.